Certain things people only do when no one is watching. Not because they feel ashamed, not because they are hiding anything, but because some aspects of intelligence only awaken in solitude. We usually think of intelligence as something public, something measurable, something that performs well in classrooms, meetings, debates, interviews, and social situations. But some of the rarest forms of intelligence are nearly invisible. They don't always appear charismatic, they don't always sound impressive, and they definitely don't always fit into the world's definition of being smart. Because this type of intelligence doesn't just solve problems, it observes itself. It questions its own motives. It notices contradictions. It can sit in silence long enough to hear what most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. And that's where the shift begins. What if your intelligence isn't rare because you know more, but because you can tolerate more truth? What if the real sign of unusual intelligence is not how well you function in the outer world, but what you do when you are alone with your inner one? Carl Jung believed that beneath the social self, the polished self, the acceptable self, the self that knows how to smile on cue and say the right thing, there is something much deeper. A hidden world, a shadow, a private stage where your fears, instincts, memories, fantasies, and unlived possibilities all wait for your attention. Most people spend their entire lives running from that inner world. But a rare kind of person enters it willingly. And if you've ever felt like your deepest habits only make sense in private, if you've ever done strange, intense, deeply reflective things when alone that you could never fully explain to others, this may help you understand why. These are not just habits. They are signs that your mind is not merely trying to survive reality. It is trying to understand it. You have full conversations with people who aren't physically there. Not just random imaginary arguments, not just replaying what you should have said. Something deeper happens. You sit alone in your room, in your car, in the shower, late at night, and suddenly you're speaking to someone who isn't present. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's someone you loved. Maybe it's someone who hurt you. Maybe it's an older version of yourself. Maybe it's someone you haven't even met yet. And to the outside world, this might look unusual. But psychologically, it can reveal something extraordinary. Because rare intelligence often takes the form of inner dialogue. It means your mind doesn't just experience life. It processes life through multiple layers. You don't simply react to events. You create an internal council around them. One part of you is hurt. One part is rational. One part is suspicious. One part is wiser than your age. One part is still a child and afraid. And when you're alone, all of them begin to speak. Most people are dominated by a single voice, an impulse, a fear, an ego, or a habit. But highly unusual minds often experience themselves as a kind of inner plurality. Not madness, but depth. A recognition that the self is not a single flat surface, but an entire landscape. This is why solitude can feel so alive for you. Because when the world goes quiet, the psyche becomes loud. What you call talking to yourself may actually be your unconscious trying to become conscious. Those imagined conversations aren't always pointless. Sometimes they are rehearsals for truth. Sometimes they are delayed grief. Sometimes they are a courtroom where your soul finally tries to say what your mouth never could. And maybe the reason you do this alone is because other people interrupt the process too early. They want the polished version, the summarized version, the socially acceptable version. But when you're alone, you let the thought unfold completely. You let the anger speak. You let the wound respond. You let the wiser voice appear after the emotional one burns itself out. That's not overthinking. That's deep psychological processing. In a shallow culture, people often mistake inner complexity for dysfunction. But some of the rarest forms of intelligence look exactly like this. A person alone in a room, speaking to invisible figures, and becoming more honest with themselves than they ever are in public. You often step away to think before deciding what you truly feel. Some people know what they feel instantly. You don't. Not because you're disconnected, but because your mind doesn't trust first impressions. When something happens, a betrayal, a compliment, an opportunity, an insult, a sudden attraction, a strange discomfort, you often need to be alone before you know what you actually think about it. In the moment, you may seem calm or neutral or difficult to read. People may even assume you're emotionally detached, but that's rarely the truth. What's really happening is that your mind is gathering information from multiple levels at once. Your body noticed something. Your instincts noticed something. Your memory attached something to it. Your shadow reacted to it. Your social mask filtered it. And your conscious mind is still catching up. So instead of responding immediately, you withdraw. Not always physically, sometimes just mentally. You go quiet. You delay the reply. You walk alone. You stare at the ceiling. You let the moment echo. And only in solitude does the real answer arrive. This is one of the clearest signs of rare intelligence. You don't confuse speed with truth. You understand that first reactions are often influenced by ego, fear, the need to appear unbothered, the desire to be liked, or old wounds disguised as clarity. So you wait. And in waiting, you listen. That is rare because most people are trained to react quickly and call it authenticity. But not everything fast is honest. Sometimes what feels immediate is just conditioning. Sometimes your first feeling is not your deepest feeling. What looks like anger might be humiliation. What looks like attraction might be loneliness. What looks like peace might be emotional numbness. What looks like confidence might be disconnection. A highly developed inner life understands this, which is why you need privacy to separate signal from noise. A great deal of human suffering comes from being controlled by forces we don't understand. We think, this is me, but it may just be a pattern, a trigger, or an inherited response. So when you step away to think alone, you are doing something most people never learn to do. You are refusing to let the unconscious drive your actions without being seen. You are creating space between stimulus and identity. And that space is where rare intelligence exists, not in always having answers, but in respecting the mystery of your own reactions long enough to discover the real ones. You intentionally revisit painful memories, not to suffer, but to understand them. This is where things become uncomfortable, because one thing highly intelligent people often do alone is something most people avoid entirely. They go back to the memory, back to the embarrassment, back to the conversation, back to the place they grew up in, at least in their mind. Back to the version of themselves that broke and never fully explained why. From the outside, this can seem unhealthy. Why think about it again? Why not let it go? Why revisit the past? But what people don't realize is this. You're not always returning to the pain to relive it. Sometimes you're returning to retrieve something, a meaning, a pattern, a lost part of yourself. Because rare intelligence is often like archaeology. It doesn't just want relief, it wants understanding. It wants to know why certain moments still burn years later. Why one sentence changed your personality. Why one betrayal altered your nervous system. Why one phase of your life still lives within you like unfinished weather. Most people want closure quickly, but deeper minds want comprehension. And comprehension often requires revisiting the experience more than once, each time from a different level of awareness. At first, you revisit the memory as the one who was hurt, then as the observer, then as the analyst, then as your older self, then as someone finally able to name what truly happened. And suddenly, the memory changes, not because the past changed, but because your relationship to it did. Healing is not about pretending the darkness never existed. It is about walking into it with awareness. The rare individual is often willing to do that alone, to sit with uncomfortable memories, to examine their meaning, to ask what was created in that moment, what was lost, what part of them got frozen there, what belief was formed in that pain that still shapes how they love, work, trust, and connect. This is not obsession. It is inner excavation. There is, of course, a line between reflection and getting stuck. But what distinguishes this process is intention. You are not trapped in the past. You are studying it. You are decoding it. You are trying to understand yourself at a level most people never reach. And that willingness to face what is uncomfortable, to sit with what others avoid, to question what others accept without thinking, that is where a rare kind of intelligence quietly lives. And self-torment. But when done consciously, returning to pain is not weakness. It is one of the bravest expressions of intelligence. Because many people remember their lives only in fragments, while you are trying to integrate yours. And maybe that is why solitude matters so deeply to you. Because when you are alone, memory is no longer competing with performance. You don't have to pretend to be healed. You don't have to rush the process. You don't have to package your pain into a lesson for others. You can simply enter the old wound and ask it one honest question. What are you still trying to teach me? And sometimes what comes back is not pain, but a missing piece of yourself. You create private systems that no one else knows about. This one is subtle, yet powerful. If your intelligence is rare, there's a strong chance you do something in private that almost no one sees. You create hidden systems, not necessarily because you are organized in a conventional way, but because your mind naturally builds inner structure. Maybe you keep notes that nobody else would understand. Maybe you map patterns between people. Maybe you journal in fragments. Maybe you save unusual quotes that feel like keys. Maybe you categorize your emotional states. Maybe you build rules, models, frameworks, voice memos, symbols, lists, or mental constellations that help you make sense of life. To others, it might look random, excessive, abstract, or intense. But to you, it is survival. Because rare intelligence often cannot exist comfortably inside chaos unless it can translate that chaos into meaning. So you build systems. Private ones. Systems for understanding people. Systems for tracking your own cycles. Systems for decoding your behavior. Systems for protecting your peace. Systems for noticing when your inner world is drifting. Systems for remembering what the world keeps trying to make you forget. This is not just productivity, it is psychological structure. The mind often speaks in symbols long before it speaks in clean logic. And highly intuitive, psychologically complex individuals often create personal rituals or structures that act as bridges between conscious and unconscious life. Maybe that is why your room, your notes, your journals, your folders, your playlists, your saved screenshots, your unfinished writing, all feel like extensions of your psyche. To others, they may look like clutter. To you, they are evidence. Evidence of thought, evidence of becoming, evidence that your inner life is not random, only untranslated. And there is something else here as well. People with rare intelligence often cannot rely entirely on external systems, because the world's frameworks are often too shallow for what they are trying to understand. So they build their own quietly, in the background. Not for applause, not for approval, but because their inner world is too rich to leave unstructured. This is why solitude can feel so productive for you, even when nothing visible is happening. You may look like you are just sitting there, but internally, you are arranging chaos into patterns. You are building a language for experiences that never came with instructions. You are turning invisible complexity into inner order. That is a rare ability. The world celebrates visible output, but some of the most intelligent work ever done is invisible. A person alone mapping their own mind so they do not get lost inside it. You observe yourself while you are feeling something. This is one of the most unusual and revealing traits of rare intelligence. When you are alone and emotional, angry, jealous, heartbroken, ashamed, excited, or afraid, a part of you is not only feeling the emotion, it is watching you experience it. It is almost as if two versions of you exist at once. One is immersed in the feeling, the other is observing it. And that can be exhausting, but it can also be extraordinary. Because what this reveals is meta-consciousness, the ability to witness your own inner state while you are inside it. Most people become their emotions. You often become aware of them. Even in the middle of intensity, there is a quiet voice inside saying, "This is not just anger, this is older. This feeling is disproportionate. You are triggered. You are pretending not to care. You are hurt because your pride was involved. You wanted to be chosen. You are grieving something deeper than the event itself." That inner observer is rare, and if it is developed well, it becomes a form of psychological intelligence far more valuable than raw intellect. Because a person who can observe themselves can interrupt patterns. A person who can witness themselves can evolve. A person who can name the hidden layer of their emotions is less likely to be controlled by them forever. But there is also a shadow side. Sometimes this self-observation becomes so constant that you struggle to simply exist in the moment. You analyze your sadness while feeling sad. You dissect joy while experiencing it. You monitor your reactions in real time. You question whether what you feel is genuine, performative, wounded, avoidant, attached, defensive, projected, or inherited. Yes, that can be tiring. But it also means your psyche is not asleep. It means a part of you refuses unconscious living. The goal is not to eliminate darkness, but to become aware of it. And that is exactly what this private habit suggests. When you are alone, you do not just feel, you witness. You question, you reflect. You catch yourself in the process of becoming. And over time, this gives you something powerful. Self-honesty. Not the artificial kind, not the performative kind. Real self-honesty. The kind that admits, I wasn't just hurt, I was humiliated. I didn't love them. I needed their validation. I am not over it. I am pretending. I am afraid. I wanted control, not connection. I said yes because I feared being abandoned. I call it peace, but maybe I have gone numb. That level of awareness can feel heavy, but it is one of the clearest signs of deep inner development. Many people spend their entire lives avoiding themselves. You study yourself in private until the mask begins to fall away. And once you have seen yourself clearly, you cannot return to living only on the surface. You experiment with identities in private before revealing who you are. People often think identity is something stable, something obvious, something you either have or you don't. But rare intelligence experiences identity differently. Not as a fixed label, but as a living question. So when you are alone, you try on different versions of yourself. Not in a false way, but in an exploratory way. You imagine saying what you usually suppress. You imagine leaving the life you built. You imagine becoming more distant, softer, bolder, or quieter. You write thoughts you would never share publicly. You admit ambitions you would never say out loud. You test beliefs in silence before attaching them to your identity. This matters because a highly aware psyche understands that the social self is often only partially real. Much of what we present to the world is adaptation, a persona built for belonging, useful, necessary, sometimes even elegant, but still a mask. Solitude becomes the space where you ask, who am I when no one expects anything from me? What do I actually believe when I am not trying to fit in? What kind of life do I want if I stop performing? What thoughts am I afraid to think in public? What desires have I buried to maintain my current identity? This is where individuation begins, becoming who you truly are, often starts with realizing that the life you are living may be built on an incomplete version of yourself. So alone, you experiment. You allow uncomfortable honesty. You explore possibilities that others might not understand. You allow contradictions. One day, you want complete solitude. Another day, deep connection. One day, status repels you. Another day, you want influence. One day, you feel spiritual. Another day, skeptical. One day, you forgive easily. Another day, you recognize the tension within yourself. Instead of forcing clarity too early, you observe. You allow your inner world to unfold in phases. This is rare because most people lock themselves into identities too quickly just to feel secure. But unusual intelligence tolerates ambiguity. It can exist within the unfinished self. It can handle the uncertainty of transformation. And the reason you do this alone is simple. Identity exploration is sacred before it is shared. If exposed too early, others will try to define you before you understand yourself. They will call you inconsistent when you are evolving. They will call you confused when you are actually discovering something deeper. So you protect the process. You allow the next version of yourself to form quietly. And sometimes, by the time the world sees the new you, the transformation has already happened in private long before. You withdraw not because you dislike people, but because too much superficiality exhausts you. This is one of the most misunderstood traits. If your intelligence is rare, you likely spend a lot of time alone, and people often misinterpret that in the simplest ways. They assume you are antisocial, arrogant, detached, broken, avoidant, moody, or difficult. But sometimes the truth is much more specific. You withdraw because constant shallowness drains your energy. You can tolerate noise, you can tolerate crowds, but what wears you down is the absence of depth. Conversations that never go beyond the surface, interactions that feel scripted, connections that lack authenticity. So you step away, not to escape people, but to preserve clarity. Because your mind is not built to live entirely at the surface. It is built to explore what lies beneath it.